Suffering is a very real thing, and it's something we've all experienced. So we never want to approach this issue casually like we're answering some kind of academic question. Many times, this question grows right out of some very real personal experiences where either someone has suffered or they've watched someone they love suffer, maybe a family member or a friend. Maybe they even prayed and nothing seemed to happen. So this can be hard. Quite honestly, if God is all powerful and all good, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that He'd allow this to happen, does it? I'm sure you've wondered about this yourself. Maybe you've even struggled with it. I know there's been times that I have. The Bible has a lot to say about suffering. And so, if I were talking with Christians about this, I'd look at how God uses suffering in our lives in so many ways to accomplish what He's up to. But the answers here at Therefore Project are designed to help you engage with non Christians who don't understand God and His ways. And so, in reality, it's all kind of confusing to them. So these answers are intentionally crafted to be more logical in nature to give them something to think about. The big question that you're asking is this: what do you want God to do? If somebody asks about suffering, we want to go, what do you want God to do? Now, the obvious answer is to stop suffering. But the bigger question we wanted to think about is, how is God supposed to do that? So keep that in mind as we continue with this video. Now, there are two major causes for the suffering we experience. The first is that suffering is the result of human choice, both ours and that of others. The second is that suffering is the result of just being human. I'm not going to talk about the first here because we've already done that in a video called How Can God Allow Evil? I encourage you to watch that so you can get a better perspective on that part of the issue. But I do want to look at the second. For God to stop suffering, He would have to change what it means to be human. I don't think my computer suffers, although I haven't ever talked to it, when it gets a virus. But I do. When I had shingles on the cornea of my left eye a few years ago, which is a virus, I suffered a lot as I had to lay motionless in the dark for 6 weeks with a tremendous amount of pain. When my car tire got a nail in it, I don't think it suffered. But when I stepped on a nail, I suffered a whole lot. When a close friend of mine turned on me and said terrible things about me, I suffered. But when I was disappointed with my power saw and I told other people about it, I don't think my saw suffered. The difference is that I'm a living human, and my computer and my tire and my power saw aren't. For me to not suffer, God would have to make me more like them, unfeeling and uncaring. Any takers? Being living human beings means we function on both a physical and emotional level, which can lead to both physical and emotional suffering. These two are very often very interconnected. Physical suffering affects us emotionally, and emotional suffering can affect us physically. This is because, unlike machines, we can feel. In the Terminator movies, the Terminators were these machines that were made to look like humans. Although, quite honestly, I haven't seen a whole lot of humans who looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Anyway, they couldn't feel. They couldn't cry, they couldn't love, they couldn't have any relational attachments. And as a result, guess what? They didn't suffer. Now, some of us may have suffered watching them, especially some of the later ones, because after all, we're humans. Some of you may have been around or know someone with Alzheimer's. My mother had it for the final 5 years of her life, and so I was around it a lot. Millions of dollars and man hours have been poured into research to improve the detection and the treatment because it's a dreaded disease. But why? During my mother's final years, quite honestly, she was happier, she was less critical, and she was more pleasant than many of the previous years of her life. So why is that so bad? The reason we think of Alzheimer's as bad, and it is because it robs people of being human. It robs them of emotions. It robs them of the ability to love. It robs them of the ability to have relationships or to problem solve. The very things we value most about being human. Yet it's those very emotions and relationships that produce the suffering we want God to stop. Sadness, a broken heart, disappointment, loss of hope. The only way we can stop that suffering is to change what it means to be human, to kind of remove the human chip, to take away our ability to love and to care and to plan and to have dreams. I don't think any of us want that, but that's the price we'd have to pay to stop suffering. Then, of course, there's physical suffering. We all want God to stop that, right? We all know that no living thing lives forever, right? Over time, everything alive deteriorates and eventually dies. So with the human body being made up of over 30 trillion cells, 7 trillion nerves, over 200 bones, and 78 organs, all of which are living, There is a lot of deterioration going on all the time. And as it does, which is inevitable, it results in physical suffering. Disease is a major player in this deterioration process, which is all part of the downline of living in an imperfect world. Again, this is something we looked at in the Why Does God Allow Evil video. We all know that bad things exist on our planet, but what we might not know is that it's not God's agenda to stop them. None of these bad things are going to exist in heaven, but evil, pain, and suffering will always be part of the landscape of earth. It's all part of being human. Now, about this time, if the conversation had gone this way, I'd probably say something like, while it's not God's agenda to wipe out suffering, it is his agenda to help us walk through it in a way that changes everything. In many ways, that's actually what the Bible's about. In fact, if you have a few minutes, I can show you just how that works. And then if the opportunity is open, I would communicate the gospel. You have to know in reality, we will never be able to explain and understand evil, pain, and suffering in a way that makes sense to people. Because when they're hurting, all they're interested in is relief. But if people can understand the love of God, if they can cross that line of faith, if they can get the Spirit of God in them, it'll change them in a way that not only affects their today, but it'll affect their tomorrow and it'll affect their forever. So join the adventure because the gospel is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes.